Hara's day began like so many others, under the oppressive shadow of Zeski's tyranny. The first rays of the pale morning sun filtered through the grime-smeared windows of their small house on planet Z9, casting long, forlorn shadows across the room. Hara moved silently through the cramped quarters, her heart heavy with dread and weariness. She knew better than to make a sound that might disturb the sleeping beast in the next room. Mira, her precious daughter, lay curled up on the makeshift bed they shared, her innocent face a stark contrast to the harsh reality around them. Hara's heart ached as she watched her child sleep, cherishing these quiet moments before Zeski awoke. Mira deserved better, and Hara vowed, once again, to find a way to give her that. The peace was shattered by the sound of Zeski stirring. Hara's body tensed instinctively, her mind racing through the list of things she needed to do to avoid his wrath today. The man who had once been her partner was now her greatest tormentor, his temper a volatile force that could ignite with the slightest provocation. She hurried to the kitchen area, preparing his morning meal with practiced efficiency, knowing that any delay or mistake could set off an explosive reaction. Zeski stumbled into the room, his hulking form filling the space with an oppressive presence. His eyes, cold and unfeeling, locked onto Hara with a disdain that made her skin crawl. He grunted, an acknowledgement that was more of a threat than a greeting, and slumped into a chair, his movements heavy and deliberate. "Where's my breakfast?" he growled, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down Hara's spine. "Coming, Zeski," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She placed the plate of food in front of him, careful to avoid eye contact. Any sign of defiance, real or perceived, could lead to consequences she couldn't afford. He ate in silence, his chewing the only sound in the room. Hera stood nearby, her hands clasped together, her mind focused on staying invisible. She was used to this routine, the dance of submission she had perfected over years of enduring his abuse. But no matter how well she performed, there was always the risk that Zeski's temper would flare. "Mama," a small, sleepy voice broke the tension. Mira had woken up, her bright eyes blinking in the morning light. She rubbed them with tiny fists, unaware of the danger her innocence could provoke. Hara's heart skipped a beat. She moved quickly to intercept her daughter, scooping her up and holding her close. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's get you ready for the day." Zeski's glare turned toward them, a storm gathering in his expression. "Keep that brat quiet," he snarled, slamming his fist on the table. The sound echoed through the room, a violent punctuation to his command. "Yes, Zeski," Hara said, her voice tight with fear. She carried Mira to the corner of the room, whispering soothing words to calm her. The child sensed her mother's tension and fell silent, her wide eyes filled with confusion. Once Zeski finished his meal, he pushed the plate away and stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm going out," he announced, as if his departure was a gift rather than a reprieve. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. The house fell into a heavy silence. Hara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She set Mira down and knelt before her, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's face. "Are you all right, my love?" Mira nodded, her small hands clutching at Hara's shirt. "Mama, why is Daddy so angry all the time?" Hara's heart broke at the question, but she forced a smile. "Sometimes people don't know how to show their feelings the right way," she said gently. "But I promise you we will be okay. I will always protect you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of chores and caution. Hera did her best to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Mira, hiding her own fear and exhaustion behind a mask of determination. Every noise outside made her flinch, anticipating Zeski's return and the inevitable confrontation it would bring. As night fell, Hara tucked Mira into bed, singing a lullaby from her own childhood. The soothing melody was a fragile link to a time when life was simpler and happiness wasn't a distant dream. Mira's eyelids grew heavy, and soon she was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. Hara sat by the window, looking out at the stars that dotted the night sky. Each one seemed to hold a promise, a whisper of hope that there was something better out there for her and Mira. She clung to that hope, drawing strength from it as she faced another night alone. She knew that the shadows of Zeski's presence would never truly disappear, but as long as she had her daughter and the will to fight, she would endure. For Mira's sake, she would find a way to break free from the darkness and step into the light. Hara stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing the last of the dinner plates. The small apartment was quiet, a rare moment of peace that felt like a fragile bubble ready to burst at any moment. Mira, her bright-eyed daughter, was playing quietly in the corner with a worn-out stuffed animal, her innocent laughter a soothing balm to Hara's weary soul. The door slammed open, and Hara flinched, her heart racing. Zeski's heavy footsteps echoed through the narrow hallway, and she could hear the unmistakable clinking of bottles. Her pulse quickened, and she dried her hands hastily, bracing herself for the storm that was about to erupt. Zeski stumbled into the kitchen, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a dangerous gleam. The stench of alcohol clung to him, and Hara could see the bulging veins on his forehead, a clear sign that his temper was about to flare. She cast a quick glance at Mira, who had paused her play, sensing the tension in the air. "Where's my dinner?" Zeski barked, his voice slurred and menacing. Hara swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's in the oven, Zeski. Let me get it for you." As she moved to retrieve the meal, Zeski's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with a vice-like grip. "You think you can keep me waiting?" he growled, his grip tightening painfully. Hara bit back a cry of pain, her eyes meeting his. "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to placate him. "It won't happen again." He released her with a shove, and she stumbled back, catching herself on the counter. Her wrist throbbed, but she ignored it, quickly plating his dinner and setting it on the table. Zeski slumped into the chair, tearing into the food with an animalistic hunger, grumbling under his breath. As she watched him, Hara's mind raced. She had to protect Mira, had to find a way out of this nightmare, but every avenue she considered seemed fraught with danger. Zeski's unpredictable nature made any attempt to escape perilous, and she feared what he might do if he ever caught wind of her plans. Later that night, after Zeski had passed out in a drunken stupor, Hara sat by Mira's bedside, stroking her daughter's hair as she slept. The weight of her predicament pressed down on her, and tears welled up in her eyes. She had to be strong for Mira's sake, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. Days turned into weeks, and the situation grew more volatile. Zeski's temper flared more often, and Hara found herself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid provoking him. She became adept at hiding the bruises, both physical and emotional, from the outside world. But no matter how careful she was, the violence always found a way to seep through the cracks. Then, one fateful evening, everything changed. Zeski came home late, his eyes wild and filled with a manic energy. Hara could sense that something was different, a new level of danger in the air. He paced the living room, muttering to himself, and she kept Mira close, her heart pounding with fear. Without warning, Zeski grabbed his coat and stormed out of the apartment, leaving the door ajar. Hara watched him go, her mind racing. She knew better than to follow, but the gnawing anxiety wouldn't let her rest. Hours passed, and she sat in the dim light, waiting for his return. The next morning, the sound of sirens jolted her awake. She rushed to the window and saw police vehicles surrounding the building. Her heart sank as she watched officers escort Zeski in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage. He struggled against their grip, shouting obscenities that echoed through the streets. A knock on the door made her jump, and she opened it to find a stern-faced officer standing there. "Mom, we need to ask you a few questions about your husband," he said, his tone formal but not unkind. Hara nodded numbly, her mind struggling to process what was happening. She answered their questions as best as she could, piecing together the fragments of Zeski's latest escapade. It turned out he had been involved in a violent altercation at a local bar, resulting in severe injuries to another patron. The gravity of his crime meant he would be facing a lengthy prison sentence. As the police left, Hara sank to the floor, a mix of relief and dread washing over her. Zeski was finally gone, but the uncertainty of her future loomed large. The neighbors' whispers began almost immediately, and she could feel their judgmental eyes following her wherever she went. They blamed her for Zeski's actions, as if his imprisonment was somehow her fault. Her gaze turned into a blur of fear and isolation. The landlord's demands for rent grew more insistent, and Hara knew she was running out of time. She had to find a way to survive, to protect Mira from the harsh realities that threatened to engulf them. But as she looked at her daughter's innocent face, she vowed to find a way, no matter the cost. In the stillness of the night, Hara made a decision. She would leave this place, this planet, and find a new life for herself and Mira. It was a risky plan, fraught with uncertainty, but it was the only chance they had. She began to gather their belongings, preparing for the journey that lay ahead. The road would be long and treacherous, but Hara's resolve was unbreakable. She would do whatever it took to ensure a better future for her daughter. The sun dipped low over the horizon of planet Z9, casting a dim, amber glow over the crumbling tenements that lined the streets. Hara stood by the narrow window of their small, dingy apartment, staring at the bustling city below. The once vibrant neighborhood had become a place of whispers and judgmental glances ever since Zeski's arrest. She could feel the weight of their stares, their murmurs of disdain, as if she had been the one to commit the crime. Mira played quietly in the corner with a tattered stuffed toy, her innocent laughter a stark contrast to the grim reality closing in around them. Hera turned to look at her daughter, her heart aching with a mix of love and worry. The rent was due in a few days, and their savings were almost gone. The landlord, a burly alien with a perpetually sour expression, had already warned her once. She knew he wouldn't be patient for long. Hera moved to the small kitchen area, opening the nearly empty cabinets and refrigerator. She sighed, realizing there was barely enough food to last the week. The remnants of their once comfortable life had dwindled to scraps, and the options for replenishing their supplies seemed non-existent. Zeski's arrest had not only shattered their safety but also their financial stability. A knock at the door startled her. She glanced at the clock, too late for a friendly visit. Her heart raced as she approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, she saw the looming figure of the landlord, his expression as unyielding as ever. She opened the door slightly, keeping the chain latched. "Hara," he grunted, his voice as harsh as his demeanor. "Rent's due in 3 days. You got it." I'm working on it," Hara stammered, her mind racing for an excuse. "I just need a little more time." He snorted, his eyes narrowing. "Time doesn't pay the bills. If you don't have the money by the end of the week, you're out. I've got others who can pay." Hara's throat tightened. "Please, just a little more time. I have a daughter." "Not my problem," he interrupted, turning on his heel. 3 days, Hera. No excuses." The door slammed shut, echoing in the silence of the apartment. Hara leaned against the wall, her knees threatening to give way. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Desperation gnawed at her insides, but she couldn't let Mira see her fear. She returned to the living area, where Mira looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Mama, who was that?" "Just someone asking about something," Hara said softly, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." Mira nodded, her innocence both a comfort and a burden. Hera watched her for a moment, then went to the small desk in the corner, pulling out a piece of paper and a pen. She began to list out their remaining assets and possible solutions, her mind spinning with anxiety. There had to be a way. She thought about her skills, what little she had beyond caring for Mira and keeping their home. She had once been a talented artist, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Could she find work? Sell something valuable? The questions swirled, each one met with a grim reality that left her feeling more hopeless. As the night deepened, Hara sat by the window again, her gaze lost in the twinkling city lights. She thought about the future, about the uncertain days ahead. Leaving Z9 seemed like an impossible dream, but staying felt like a slow death. Every option seemed fraught with danger, every path leading to an unknown fate. But she couldn't afford to give up. For Mira's sake, she had to keep fighting. She had to find a way out of this darkness, even if it meant taking risks she had never considered before. The thought of smuggling her way off the planet crossed her mind, a desperate plan born of necessity. With a resolve born of love and desperation, Hara made her decision. She would find a way to escape, to give Mira the life she deserved. No matter the cost, she would protect her daughter and carve out a new future for them both. The shadows of Zeski's crime and their financial struggles would not define them. Hara would see to that. The dimly lit room was suffused with a heavy air of desperation. Hara sat on the edge of a tattered sofa, her heart pounding as she reviewed the plan over and over in her mind. The flickering light above cast long shadows on the cracked walls, mirroring the turmoil within her. Mira, her precious daughter, lay asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware of the gravity of their situation. Hara knew she had to act swiftly. The walls of their small, dilapidated home were closing in on them, and the threat of eviction loomed large. Zeski's imprisonment had brought a bittersweet sense of relief, but the weight of survival now rested squarely on Hara's shoulders. The neighbors' whispers, the landlord's threats, and the cold, judgmental stares from society had worn her down. Hara's resolve, however, remained unbroken. She was a mother, and she would do whatever it took to protect her child. She reached for the small, rusted lockbox hidden beneath the floorboards. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing the modest sum she had managed to save over the years. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Hara counted the credits carefully, her mind racing through the possibilities. The plan was risky, but staying on Z9 was no longer an option. Hara had heard whispers of human smugglers who could ferry desperate souls to safer planets for a hefty price. It was a dangerous and illegal route, but it was the only glimmer of hope she had. Gathering her courage, she decided to seek out the smugglers, knowing that her and Mira's fate hung in the balance. The night was shrouded in darkness as Hara made her way through the narrow, winding alleys of Z9's underbelly. The city was a maze of decaying buildings and forgotten dreams, a stark contrast to the vibrant metropolis it once was. Hara's steps were quick but cautious, her eyes darting around for any sign of danger. She had to be discreet, any misstep could lead to disaster. After what felt like an eternity, Hara reached the rundown tavern that served as a front for the smugglers' operations. The air inside was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap alcohol. Hara's heart raced as she approached the bar, where a burly man with a scar across his cheek stood cleaning a glass. His eyes, cold and calculating, met hers. "I'm looking for passage," Hara said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The man's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he nodded towards a shadowy figure in the corner of the room. "Talk to him." Hara's palms were clammy as she approached the figure. The smuggler looked up, revealing a face hardened by years of illicit dealings. His eyes were sharp, taking in Hara's appearance and the desperation in her eyes. "I need to get off this planet," Hara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have credits." The smuggler leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Where do you want to go?" "Exlara," Hara replied, the name of the distant planet sounding like a lifeline. The smuggler smirked. "It's not cheap. Do you have the payment?" Hara nodded and handed over the lockbox. The smuggler opened it, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he counted the credits. After a moment he closed the box and looked at Hara. "Fine. Be at the docks tomorrow night. Bring only what you can carry. And remember, if you tell anyone about this, you'll regret it." Hera nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. She turned to leave, her mind racing with preparations for their escape. The walk back home felt like a blur, her thoughts consumed by the enormity of what she was about to do. As she entered their small home, she found Mira still asleep, her innocent face a stark contrast to the turmoil around them. Hara spent the night packing their essentials, her movements swift and silent. She packed clothes, a few cherished mementos, and enough food to last a few days. The weight of their predicament pressed heavily on her, but she pushed through, driven by the need to protect her daughter. The next night, Hara and Mira slipped out of their home, leaving behind the life they had known. The city was eerily quiet as they made their way to the docks, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery. Hara's heart pounded in her chest, each step bringing them closer to an uncertain future. At the docks, the smuggler awaited with a few other desperate souls seeking passage. The ship was a battered old freighter, its hull scarred by countless journeys. Hara held Mira's hand tightly, her resolve unwavering. As they boarded the ship, Hera cast one last look at the planet Z9. The place that had been both a home and a prison was now a distant memory. She turned away, her focus now on the future, and the hope of a better life for her and Mira. Little did Hara know, the journey ahead would be fraught with danger and unexpected twists. The smugglers had their own plans, and the destination they promised was far from what awaited them. But Hara's determination burned bright, a beacon of hope in the darkness that surrounded them. The ship's dim, flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls as it shuddered through the void. Hara clutched Mira tightly to her chest, the young girl's small frame trembling against her own. They had been traveling for what felt like an eternity, the cramped quarters and the uncertainty of their destination gnawing at her already frayed nerves. The other passengers, huddled together in anxious silence, shared her apprehension, their eyes darting with unspoken fears. As the ship began its descent, A series of harsh jolts and metallic groans reverberated through the cabin. Hara's heart pounded in her chest, a wild rhythm that matched the turmoil within her mind. She whispered soothing words to Mira, though she could barely keep the fear from her own voice. "We're almost there, my love," she murmured, stroking her daughter's hair. "Just a little longer, and we'll be safe." The ship touched down with a bone-rattling thud, and the passengers were herded towards the exit. Hara's breath caught in her throat as the hatch opened, revealing a barren, desolate landscape. The air was heavy with dust, and the sky above was a murky, oppressive gray. This was not the vibrant, welcoming world of Exlara that the smugglers had promised. Panic surged through her veins as she stepped onto the alien soil, her senses overwhelmed by the stark, hostile environment. She spun around, desperate to catch the eye of the smuggler who had taken their money, their hope. But the man avoided her gaze, his face a mask of indifference as he oversaw the disembarkation. "Wait," Hara called out, her voice cracking with desperation. "This isn't Exlara. Where have you brought us?" The smuggler shrugged, a cruel smirk curling his lips. "This is Bulwef. Not my problem if you don't like it." Rage and fear intertwined, making her feel dizzy. She took a step forward, but the man waved her off, turning his back and heading towards the ship. Within moments the hatch sealed shut, and the vessel lifted off, leaving Hara and the others stranded on the forsaken planet. Tears welled in her eyes as she surveyed their surroundings. The landscape stretched out in every direction, an endless expanse of rocky terrain and skeletal trees. The other passengers, equally disoriented and fearful, clustered together, their faces etched with despair. "We need to find shelter," an older alien woman said, her voice trembling. "We can't stay out here in the open." Hara nodded, forcing herself to focus. Mira's wide, frightened eyes anchored her, giving her the strength to push aside her own terror. She took her daughter's hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Let's move," Hara said, her voice steady despite the chaos within. "We'll find something. We have to." They trudged through the arid wasteland, the ground crunching beneath their feet. Every step felt like a battle against the elements, the wind whipping dust into their eyes and mouths. Hours passed in a grim procession, the landscape offering no respite, no hint of sanctuary. Just as despair began to seep into her bones, Hera spotted a jagged outcrop of rocks in the distance. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, she led the group towards it, hoping against hope that it might provide some shelter from the relentless environment. As they neared the outcrop, Hera's heart lifted slightly. The rocks formed a small, natural cave, its entrance partially obscured by twisted, thorny bushes. It wasn't much, but it was something, a place to rest, to regroup, to plan their next move. They stumbled into the cave, collapsing onto the cool, hard ground. Hara pulled Mira close, wrapping her in a protective embrace. The others huddled together, sharing the scant warmth and comfort they could offer each other. Night fell swiftly, the temperature dropping sharply. Hera and the others did their best to create a barrier against the cold, using their meager belongings. Exhaustion eventually claimed them, their sleep troubled by dreams of what they had left behind and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. When dawn broke, the harsh light filtering into the cave, Hera felt a renewed determination. She would not let this be their end. She would find a way to keep Mira safe, to survive, no matter the odds. As she rose and stepped outside, the sight that greeted her took her breath away. In the distance, a glimmer of metal caught the sunlight, an unmistakable sign of technology, of hope. Squinting, Hara made out the shape of a spaceship, its sleek form a stark contrast to the barren landscape. Her heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. Could this be their salvation? Gathering the others, Hara led them towards the distant ship, each step fueled by the possibility of rescue. As they drew nearer, she could see figures moving around the vessel, their movements purposeful and efficient. With Mira in her arms, Hera broke into a run, her voice raw with desperation. "Help. Please help us." The crew turned at her cry, their expressions shifting from surprise to concern as they took in the bedraggled group approaching them. One of the crew members, a tall man with kind eyes, stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Hara's. "It's going to be all right," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "We'll help you." Relief washed over Hara, her knees buckling as she fell to the ground, clutching Mira to her chest. Tears streamed down her face, a release of all the fear and anguish that had plagued her for so long. The crew moved quickly, tending to the group with practiced efficiency, offering food, water, and medical care. The captain, the man with the kind eyes, knelt beside Hara, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly. "We'll take care of you." Hara looked up at him, gratitude and hope filling her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you so much." As the crew worked to bring the group aboard the ship, Hara felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in what felt like forever. They had been betrayed, abandoned, and left to fend for themselves on a desolate planet. But now, with the help of this compassionate crew and their steadfast captain, they had a chance at a new beginning. Hara stood in the gleaming white corridor of the human spaceship, her breath coming in shallow, nervous gasps. The sterile scent of the ship was a stark contrast to the gritty, arid air of Bulwef. Mira clung tightly to her hand, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. The captain, a tall man with kind eyes and a reassuring presence, led them through the labyrinth of corridors. Hara couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope in the depths of her heart, a feeling she had long thought extinguished. "Welcome aboard the Aegis," the captain said, his voice warm and steady. "We'll get you settled in and make sure you're taken care of." The crew members they passed nodded and smiled, their expressions genuine and friendly. It was a stark contrast to the suspicious and hostile glances Hara was used to back on Z9. They reached a modest but comfortable room, equipped with 2 small bunks, a table, and a storage locker. "This will be your quarters for now," the captain said, gesturing for them to enter. "I'll have someone bring you some food and clothes. Rest and we'll talk more later." Hara nodded, grateful tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Captain. I don't know how to repay you." He smiled, a soft, understanding smile that reached his eyes. "You don't have to. Just take care of yourselves." As the door closed behind them, Hera finally allowed herself to breathe. She sat on one of the bunks, pulling Mira onto her lap and holding her close. The reality of their escape was sinking in. They were safe, at least for now. True to his word, a crew member arrived shortly after with trays of warm food and a bundle of clothes. The food was simple but nourishing, and Hara felt strength returning to her body with every bite. Mira, too, seemed to relax, her small face lighting up as she devoured the meal. Later, as they lay side by side on the bunk, Mira drifted off to sleep, her breathing slow and even. Hera, however, found herself unable to rest. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions: relief, fear, hope. She gently kissed Mira's forehead and slipped out of bed, deciding to explore the ship and perhaps find a moment of solitude to gather her thoughts. The corridors were quiet, dimly lit by the soft glow of the ship's lighting. Hara wandered aimlessly until she found herself in a small observation lounge. Large windows offered a breathtaking view of the stars' distant pinpricks of light in the vast expanse of space. She stood there, mesmerized, feeling a profound sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "You're up late." Hara turned to see the captain standing in the doorway, a gentle smile on his face. She hadn't heard him approach, lost as she was in the beauty of the stars. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, feeling suddenly self-conscious. He nodded and stepped into the room, joining her at the window. "It's understandable. You've been through a lot." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars. The captain's presence was calming, and Hara found herself wanting to open up to him, to share the burden she had carried alone for so long. "Thank you," she said finally, breaking the silence. "For everything. I don't know what would have happened to us if you hadn't found us." The captain turned to her, his expression earnest. "You don't need to thank me, Hara. It's our duty to help those in need. But if you feel like talking, I'm here to listen." Something in his tone, in the sincerity of his offer, made Hara feel safe enough to share her story. She spoke of her life with Zeski, the abuse she endured, the fear for her daughter, and the desperate escape that led them to Bulwef. The captain listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, his expression one of empathy and understanding. When she finished, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The captain reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You're incredibly strong, Hera," he said softly. "What you've done for Mira, the courage it took to escape, to protect her, it's remarkable." Hara felt a surge of emotion, tears spilling down her cheeks. I just want a better life for her. A life without fear. The captain squeezed her hand gently. And you'll have it. We'll help you find a new home, a safe place where you and Mira can start over. As they stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the endless expanse of space, Hara felt a sense of hope she had not dared to dream of. In the captain's eyes she saw not just a promise of safety, but the beginning of something new, something beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in a brighter future. The spaceship glided silently through the vast expanse of space, its journey marked by the twinkling of distant stars and the ethereal glow of nebulae. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of routine and anticipation, as the crew went about their tasks, ever mindful of their unexpected passengers. Hara stood by one of the observation windows, her eyes fixed on the mesmerizing beauty of the cosmos. The stars, so distant and yet so bright, seemed to whisper promises of hope and new beginnings. Beside her, Mira slept soundly, her small form wrapped in a warm blanket. The sight of her daughter's peaceful slumber brought a tender smile to Hara's lips, a rare moment of tranquility amidst the turmoil that had defined their lives. Footsteps approached, soft and deliberate. Hara turned to see the captain, his presence as steadying as the ship's hum. Captain Elias McAllister was a man of quiet strength, his rugged features softened by a kindness that radiated from his deep blue eyes. He had become a pillar of support for Hara and Mira, his actions speaking volumes about the man he was. "Mind if I join you?" Elias asked, his voice gentle. "Not at all," Hara replied, her smile widening. She appreciated these moments with him, the unspoken understanding that had grown between them. Elias took his place beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. Together they gazed out into the infinite night, each lost in their thoughts. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the shared experiences of their journey and the unspoken words that lingered in the air. "I've always found space to be humbling," Elias said after a while, his eyes still on the stars. "It reminds me of how small we are, yet how significant our actions can be." Hara nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It's beautiful and daunting at the same time. "I used to dream about the stars when I was a child, but now they feel like a promise of something better." Elias turned to look at her, his gaze intense yet tender. "You've been through so much, Hara. Yet you've remained strong for yourself and for Mira. It's something I deeply admire about you." A blush crept up Hera's cheeks, but she met his gaze with unwavering eyes. "I couldn't have done it without your help, Elias. You've been more than just a captain to us. You've been a savior, a friend." Elias took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Hara, there's something I need to tell you. These past weeks, getting to know you and Mira, have been some of the most meaningful moments of my life. I've seen your strength, your resilience, and your unwavering love for your daughter, and in the process, I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected." Hara's heart began to race, her pulse quickening with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "What are you saying, Elias?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you," Hara Elias confessed, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I love you for who you are, for the incredible mother you are to Mira, and for the courage you've shown in the face of adversity. I want to be there for you, to support you and protect you. I want us to build a life together, if you'll have me." Tears welled up in Hara's eyes, a mixture of relief, joy, and overwhelming love. She had never imagined finding such a connection, especially after the darkness she had endured. "Elias, I love you too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to feel safe, to be cared for. You've given me hope when I thought all was lost." Elias reached out, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. "Then let's build that life together, Hara. For us, and for Mira." Hara nodded, a radiant smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, Elias, let's do it, together." In that moment, under the vast canvas of the cosmos, Hara and Elias sealed their love with a kiss. It was a kiss filled with promise and healing, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. As they held each other, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, illuminating the path to a future filled with endless possibilities. The exploration ship glided silently through the vast expanse of space, its hull gleaming under the distant light of 1,000 stars. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of routine operations and quiet anticipation. The crew, now accustomed to their new passengers, went about their duties with a sense of purpose and camaraderie. Among them, a bond had formed, a bond that transcended species and backgrounds, built on shared experiences and newfound hope. Hara stood by the large observation window in the ship's lounge, holding Mira in her arms. The little girl, her eyes wide with wonder, pointed out at the stars, her innocent curiosity, a stark contrast to the harsh realities they had left behind. Hara smiled down at her daughter, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions, gratitude, relief, and a budding sense of happiness that she had not felt in years. As she gazed out into the infinite cosmos, she sensed a presence behind her. Turning, she found the captain standing there, his expression warm and inviting. He had become a pillar of strength for her, his kindness and empathy a beacon of light in her darkest moments. "May I join you?" he asked softly, his eyes meeting hers. "Of course," Hara replied, shifting Mira to her hip to make room for him. They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the stars. The captain then turned to face Hara, his expression serious yet tender. "Hera," he began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about our journey together, how we met under such dire circumstances, and how, despite everything, we found something truly special." Hara's heart skipped a beat. She could sense the weight of his words and the emotion behind them. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "You and Mira have brought a new sense of purpose to my life," the captain continued. "I've admired your strength, your resilience, and the way you care for your daughter. You both have become incredibly important to me." Tears welled up in Hara's eyes as she listened, her emotions a whirlwind of hope and love. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "The feeling is mutual," she whispered. "You've given us a chance at a new life, a chance to be happy again." The captain smiled, his eyes shining with affection. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage, and then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, intricately crafted ring, its design inspired by the stars they had traveled among. "Hara," he said, dropping to one knee, "I love you. I love Mira. I want to spend my life with you both, to protect and cherish you, to build a future together. Will you marry me?" Hara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The sight of the captain kneeling before her with such sincerity and love was overwhelming. Mira, sensing the significance of the moment, looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Yes," Hara breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." The captain's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He rose and pulled Hara into a tight embrace, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss. Mira giggled and clapped her hands, her delight infectious. The crew, who had been discreetly watching from a distance, erupted in cheers and applause. They gathered around, offering congratulations and well wishes. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the resilience of the human and alien spirit and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Hara and the captain stood together, surrounded by their newfound family. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but they faced it with hope and determination. They had found each other against all odds, and together, they would create a future filled with love, happiness, and endless possibilities. In the vast, uncharted expanse of space, Hera, Mira, and the captain embarked on their new beginning, a journey, not just of survival, but of a life richly lived, hand in hand, heart to heart, under the eternal light of the stars.